In a cluttered South Boston kitchen, a 58-year-old cancer patient was about to discover the unthinkable. What started as cleaning out old electronics took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her children's darkest secret. Margaret Maggie O'Brien wasn't your typical Irish mother. For 34 years, she had spent her life as the emotional anchor of her family, known for her fierce protection and unwavering love. When she plugged in that forgotten baby monitor and heard her 3 adult children placing bets on her survival, she had no idea she was walking into a nightmare that would either destroy her family or forge them stronger than ever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The nausea hit Maggie O'Brien like a freight train at 6:47 a.m., just as she was reaching for her morning coffee. She gripped the edge of the scratched Formica counter, her knuckles white against the faded pattern that Danny had promised to replace next year for the past 15 years. The bile rose in her throat, metallic and bitter, a familiar companion since her second chemo session 3 days ago. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, she thought, steadying herself against the sink. This is supposed to be helping me. The kitchen around her felt foreign in the early morning light, though she'd prepared countless meals in this same space for 34 years. The same chipped plates sat in the dish drainer, the same holy water font hung by the window, the same photograph of the Sacred Heart watched over her from above the stove. But everything felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the cancer had shrunk not just her body, but her entire world, down to this narrow row house on Dorchester Street. Outside, the February wind rattled the windows with typical Boston cruelty, promising another day of dirty snow and bone-deep cold. Maggie pulled her threadbare robe tighter around her diminished frame. When had she gotten so thin? Danny used to tease her about her Irish curves, but now she could count her ribs through the cotton fabric. Stop it, she told herself firmly. Danny's gone, and feeling sorry for yourself won't bring him back or cure the cancer. She forced herself to move, to establish some kind of normalcy in a life that had become anything but normal. The dishes could wait, the laundry could wait, everything could wait, except this gnawing need to stay busy, to prove to herself, and God, and anyone else who might be watching, that she wasn't ready to give up yet. The junk drawer stuck, as it always did, requiring the precise combination of jiggling and cursing that Danny had perfected over the years. Inside lay the detritus of family life, dead batteries, broken reading glasses, rubber bands that had lost their elasticity, and a tangle of old electronics cables that nobody could identify but everyone was afraid to throw away. She was looking for batteries. The smoke detector had been chirping since yesterday, and the sound was driving her half mad when her fingers closed around something unexpected. A small plastic rectangle with a stubby antenna, covered in dust but unmistakably familiar. The baby monitor from when Sarah's kids were small, back when they still visited regularly, back when Maggie could chase a toddler around without gasping for breath. A memory surfaced. Little Emma, Sarah's eldest, crying in the middle of the night during one of their sleepovers. Maggie had been able to hear everything through the monitor, had gone upstairs to comfort her granddaughter before Sarah even woke up. "You're like a guardian angel, Ma," Sarah had said the next morning. "How did you know she needed you?" How indeed, Maggie thought bitterly. Some guardian angel I turned out to be. On impulse, she plugged the monitor into the outlet by the kitchen table. Maybe she could use it as an intercom system, call upstairs when she needed help instead of climbing those damn stairs that left her winded. Tommy was living in his old bedroom again, had been since his divorce finalized last month, and it might be useful to be able to reach him without the trek upstairs. The device crackled to life, and immediately she heard voices. Not the ghost voices she sometimes imagined in the empty spaces of the house, but real voices. Her children's voices, coming from Tommy's room directly above. "Telling you, it's a sucker's bet," Tommy was saying. his voice carrying that particular mix of arrogance and desperation that Maggie had learned to recognize over the years. The odds are all wrong. Stage 3, aggressive treatment, her age. Jesus Christ, Tommy. She's our mother. Kevin's voice, tight with anger. This is sick, even for you. Oh, spare me the righteousness, Kev. You think I don't know what you and Marcus whisper about when you think I can't hear? How much easier things would be if... That's not the same thing, Kevin snapped. We're worried about her suffering. You're talking about her like she's a goddamn racehorse. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth, but she couldn't move away from the monitor. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. They were talking about her. About her death. About betting on her death. Sarah's voice cut through the argument, clinical and measured. The 5-year survival rate for stage 3 breast cancer is 72%. But that's for all patients. For someone mom's age, with her health history and the aggressive nature of her particular tumor. A pause. Honestly, I'd put it closer to 50-50. There, Tommy said, and Maggie could hear the smile in his voice. Sarah gets it. This isn't about being morbid, it's about being realistic. Ma's not getting better. We all know it. The question is whether we're going to pretend otherwise or face facts. The fact is that she's our mother, Kevin said again, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. The fact is that she's dying, Tommy countered. The fact is that her life insurance policy will pay out $200,000. The fact is that some of us could really use that money to dig out of the holes we've found ourselves in. Maggie's legs gave out. She sank into the kitchen chair, her hands shaking so violently she had to press them flat against the table. $200,000. The life insurance policy she and Danny had scraped to pay for, month after month, year after year. Insurance for the children's future, for their security. She'd never imagined they'd be counting down the days until they could collect. God, Tommy, Sarah whispered. When you put it like that. I'm putting it like it is, Tommy said. Look, I'm not saying we want her to die, but she's going to die, probably sooner rather than later. And when she does, that money is going to be divided 3 ways. I just think we should be honest about the timeline. How much do you owe them? Kevin asked quietly. A long pause. Then, 50 grand, maybe more with the interest. Jesus. It's not just about the money, Sarah said, but her voice was uncertain. I mean, it's also about preparing ourselves, about being realistic about what's coming, about taking bets on when our mother is going to die, Kevin said flatly. About acknowledging that she's going to die, Tommy corrected. The bet is it's just a way to process it, to make it real. Maggie pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from crying out. She could hear the rationalization in their voices, the way they were talking themselves into this horror. Her children, her babies, the 3 little souls she'd carried in her body, nursed at her breast, held when they cried, celebrated when they laughed. 50-50, Sarah said again. Those are the medical odds. But there are other factors. Stress, financial pressure, family support. So what are you thinking? Tommy asked. Over/under at 8 months? 10 months, Sarah said after a moment. If she makes it past Christmas, she might surprise us all. But if she doesn't? I'll take the under, Tommy said quickly. 8 months. By October. That's horrible, Kevin said, but then, quieter. I'll take the over. 12 months. She's tougher than you think. The words hit Maggie like physical blows. 12 months. 8 months. 10 months. Her children were dividing up her remaining life like a pie, placing their bets on which slice would be her last. "So we're really doing this?" Sarah asked. "We're really doing this," Tommy confirmed. "Kevin?" A long silence. Then, so quietly Maggie had to strain to hear, "Yeah, okay. We're doing this." Maggie sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary detritus of her ordinary life, and felt her world crack completely apart. The morning sun slanted through the dirty windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts. The refrigerator hummed. The smoke detector chirped. The baby monitor crackled with static as her children's voices faded. She thought of Danny, dead 6 months now from a massive heart attack that took him before the paramedics could even arrive. She thought of the empty space in their bed, the silence that had replaced his gentle snoring. She thought of the cancer growing inside her, eating away at her body cell by cell. She thought of Dr. Reyes's careful words about aggressive treatment and managing expectations. And she thought of her children upstairs, her 3 babies now grown, calculating the odds on her survival like she was nothing more than a horse at Suffolk Downs. The baby monitor crackled again, and she reached over to turn it off. But her hands stopped mid-reach. They didn't know she could hear them. They had no idea that their secret conversations were being broadcast to her kitchen, that their mother, their dying mother, was listening to every word. Knowledge was power, Danny used to say, and right now, terrible as it was, this knowledge was the only power she had left. Maggie O'Brien sat back in her chair and began to plan. But 3 days later, as she watched Tommy fidget with his coffee cup across from her at the kitchen table, she realized planning and execution were 2 entirely different beasts. "You're not eating again, Ma," Tommy said, nodding toward her untouched toast. His leg bounced under the table, a nervous habit he'd developed as a child and never outgrown. Now she knew why he was nervous. Now she knew everything. "Stomach still off from the chemo," she lied smoothly, taking a small bite to appease him. The bread tasted like cardboard, but she forced herself to swallow. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine." The lie came so easily she wondered how many others she'd missed over the years. Tommy's eyes darted to his phone when it buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message, and Maggie filed that reaction away with all the others she'd been cataloging. Since discovering the baby monitor, she'd become a student of her children's behavior. Every glance, every gesture, every careful word was now weighted with the knowledge of their betrayal. Sarah's too bright smile when she brought the grandchildren for their Sunday visit. Kevin's guilty fidgeting during their phone calls. Tommy's desperate attempts to seem normal, while his leg never stopped bouncing. The baby monitor sat in the drawer now, its secret safely hidden. But she'd learned enough in those first few days of listening. Tommy owed $50,000 to people who weren't patient. Sarah was researching oncology statistics in her spare time, building medical arguments for why her mother wouldn't see another Christmas. Kevin was telling his partner Marcus that the family was, quote, preparing for the inevitable, while downplaying his own participation in their ghoulish wager. "I should get going," Tommy said, standing abruptly. "Job interview." Another lie. She'd overheard him on the phone yesterday. There was no job interview. There was a meeting with someone named Polly about buying more time, and the fear in Tommy's voice had made her stomach clench with something that wasn't chemotherapy nausea. "Good luck, sweetheart," she said, and watched him flinch at the endearment. When had her love become something that caused her children pain? After Tommy left, Maggie climbed the stairs to her bedroom, a journey that left her breathless and clinging to the banister. She needed to get ready for her appointment with Dr. Reyes, though she dreaded what she might learn. Her last blood work had been concerning, though the doctor had been careful not to elaborate over the phone. She dressed slowly, each movement deliberate. The blouse that had fit perfectly 6 months ago now hung loose on her frame. In the mirror, She looked like a scarecrow version of herself, all sharp angles and hollow spaces where curves used to be. Danny would barely recognize her. The thought of Danny brought fresh grief, sharp and unexpected. He'd been her anchor, her translator, when the children's lives became too complicated for her to follow. "Tommy's just finding his way," he'd say when their eldest son came home drunk and angry. "Sarah's building something better for herself," he'd explain when their daughter moved to the suburbs and visited less. "Kevin's got a good heart. He'll figure it out," he'd insist when their youngest struggled with depression and identity. What would Danny say about the bet? Would he defend them? Find some way to rationalize their cruelty? Or would he be as devastated as she was? The drive to Boston Medical Center was a blur of gray February streets and dirty snow. She parked in the cancer center garage, a place that had become as familiar as her own neighborhood, and made her way to Dr. Reyes's office. "Mrs. O'Brien," Dr. Reyes said, her voice carefully neutral as she reviewed the chart. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dying," Maggie said bluntly. "Are you going to tell me I'm right?" Dr. Reyes looked up, her dark eyes kind but serious. "Your white blood cell count is concerning. The cancer isn't responding to treatment as well as we'd hoped." There it was. The confirmation her children had been waiting for, betting on, planning around. Maggie felt strangely calm, as if she'd already processed this news during those long nights of listening to their conversations. "How long?" she asked. "It's difficult to say. The cancer is aggressive, but you're stronger than your numbers suggest, with adjustments to your treatment protocol." Dr. Reyes paused. "I'd want to see how you respond over the next few months before making any definitive predictions." Months, not years. Tommy's bet was looking better every day. "I need to ask," Dr. Reyes continued gently, "do you have support at home? Family who can help with your care?" Maggie almost laughed. Support. Yes, she had plenty of support. 3 children eagerly calculating when their support duties would end and their inheritance would begin. "My children are very attentive," she said instead. The drive home was worse than the drive there. Every red light gave her too much time to think. Every familiar landmark reminded her of memories she'd soon leave behind. She found herself taking the long way, driving past St. Bridget's where she'd married Danny, past the elementary school where she'd worked in the cafeteria for 15 years, past the corner store where Danny used to buy his lottery tickets every Friday. When she finally pulled into her driveway, she sat in the car for a long moment, unwilling to face the house that had become both sanctuary and prison. Through the front window she could see Tommy pacing in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from here she could read the panic in his posture. Inside, she plugged the baby monitor back in, her hands steadier than they'd been in days. Tommy's voice came through immediately. "Told you, I need more time. Just another few weeks, maybe a month." Weeks? An unfamiliar voice, rough with menace. "Tommy boy, you've had weeks. You've had months. My patience ain't infinite. She's dying, okay? My mother, she's got cancer and the life insurance. I don't give a shit about your family drama. I want my money. You'll get it. Jesus, Polly, when have I ever not paid you back?" A harsh laugh. "You want me to count? Because I got a real good memory for people who owe me money." Maggie sank into her chair, gripping the edge of the table. Her son wasn't just in debt, he was in danger. Real, physical danger. The kind that ended with broken bones or worse. "Look," Tommy said, his voice cracking, "I'll get you $5,000 by Friday, just as a show of good faith. Then the rest when things get settled." $5,000? Polly's voice turned deadly quiet. "Out of 50? Tommy, you're insulting me." "It's all I can get right now." "Then you better find a way to get more, because my associates ain't as understanding as I am. and they're getting restless." The line went dead. Through the monitor, Maggie heard Tommy's strangled sob, followed by the sound of something, probably his phone, hitting the wall. She sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary props of her ordinary life, and felt the weight of terrible knowledge settling on her shoulders. Her children had bet on her death. Her eldest son was in danger because of gambling debts he couldn't pay. Her medical prognosis was worse than she'd hoped, and she was the only one who knew all of it. The baby monitor crackled with static, and she reached over to adjust the volume. Tommy was making another call now, and she needed to hear everything. Knowledge was power, Danny used to say. But knowledge was also a burden, and right now it felt heavy enough to crush her. But not yet. Not while her children still needed her, even if they didn't know it yet. Maggie O'Brien settled back in her chair and continued to listen, planning her next move in a game she'd never wanted to play. But 3 weeks later, as her family gathered for Sunday dinner, she realized the game was playing her. "Pass the potatoes, Ma," Sarah said, her voice artificially bright, the kind of cheer nurses used with terminal patients. "You've barely touched your food." Maggie looked around the table. The same oak table where Danny had carved their initials during their first apartment together, where she'd helped 3 children with homework, where they'd celebrated birthdays and mourned losses. Now it felt like a stage set, with everyone playing roles they'd rehearsed in secret. "I'm fine," Maggie said, then paused deliberately. "Though I suppose some people might be betting I won't be fine much longer." The silence was immediate and suffocating. Tommy's fork clattered against his plate. Sarah's face went white. Kevin looked like he might be sick. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tommy asked, but his voice was too loud, too defensive. "Oh, nothing," Maggie said, cutting a piece of roast beef with surgical precision. "Just thinking how some people place wagers on things that matter to other people. Horses, sports teams, life expectancy." She looked up, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "Terrible thing, really. Betting against those you love." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Emma and little Michael, Sarah's children, continued eating obliviously, but the adults sat frozen in various states of panic and guilt. "Ma," Kevin started, his voice thin. "Are you feeling—" "I'm feeling just fine," Maggie cut him off. "Clearer than I have in months, actually." Funny how nearly dying gives you perspective on what really matters. Another pause. Another surgical look around the table. And what doesn't? She watched them squirm for another moment, then returned to her dinner as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal passed in strained silence, broken only by the children's chatter and the scrape of silverware against china. After dinner, as Sarah helped clear the dishes and the kids played in the living room, Tommy disappeared upstairs. Within minutes, Maggie heard him through the baby monitor. "She knows," he was saying into his phone, his voice tight with panic. "I don't know how, but she fucking knows." "Knows what?" Kevin's voice. He must have called him immediately. "About the bet. About all of it." She was dropping hints all through dinner, talking about people betting against those they love. She looked right at me when she said it. Maybe she was talking about something else. "Kevin, she's not stupid. Ma's never been stupid. We were idiots to think we could keep this from her." A long pause. Then Kevin, "What do we do?" "I don't know." Tommy's voice cracked. "Polly's breathing down my neck. Ma knows about the bet, and she's probably planning to cut us all out of the will just to spite us." "She wouldn't do that," Kevin said. But he didn't sound convinced. "Wouldn't she? Christ, if someone bet on when I was going to die, I'd burn everything down just to watch them lose." Maggie almost smiled at that. Her eldest son knew her better than she'd given him credit for. The kitchen door swung open, interrupting her eavesdropping. Sarah stood there, her face blotchy with tears. "Ma, we need to talk." "Do we now?" Maggie kept washing dishes, not turning around. "About what you said at dinner. About betting against people you love." Maggie's hands stilled in the soapy water. Here it was, the moment of truth she'd been both dreading and anticipating. "I said a lot of things at dinner, sweetheart." "Ma, please." Sarah's voice broke. "I know you know." Slowly, Maggie turned around, drying her hands on the dish rag Danny had bought her for their last anniversary. Sarah stood in the doorway like a guilty child, her nurse's confidence stripped away to reveal the scared little girl underneath. "Know what, exactly?" "About the—" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "About the bet." The words hung between them like a blade. Maggie studied her daughter's face, the same face she'd kissed goodnight for 29 years, the same eyes that had looked up at her with complete trust and love. When had that trust been replaced by calculation? "Ah," Maggie said quietly, "that bet." Sarah's composure crumbled completely. She sank into a kitchen chair, her hands covering her face. "God, Ma, I'm so sorry. I never wanted. It wasn't supposed to be. Tommy just kept pushing, and I thought maybe if I could at least be realistic about the medical side. You thought you'd help your brother calculate when I'd die." The words were like slaps. Sarah flinched with each one. "It wasn't like that." "What was it like then?" Maggie's voice was deadly calm. "Explain to me how my nurse daughter, who took an oath to do no harm, thought it was appropriate to bet on my survival." "I was trying to protect you." Sarah's words came out in a rush. "Tommy was talking crazy numbers, saying you'd be gone in months, and I know your case, Ma. I know your prognosis better than anyone. I thought if I could make them see the real odds, maybe they'd stop this insanity. By participating in it. By managing it." Sarah's voice was small now, ashamed. "I thought I could control the damage." Maggie felt something cold settle in her chest. "Control the damage of your mother's death. That's not God, Ma, when you say it like that. How should I say it? How should I describe discovering that my children are placing bets on how long I have to live?" The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of children playing. Sarah wept quietly, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her guilt. "How did you find out?" she whispered finally. Maggie could have told her about the baby monitor, about weeks of secret listening, about all the terrible knowledge she'd accumulated. Instead, she said simply, "Does it matter?" "Ma, please, you have to understand." The front door slammed, cutting Sarah off. Through the kitchen window, Maggie saw Tommy stumbling up the front steps, his face a mess of blood and bruises. Sarah gasped and ran to unlock the door. "Jesus Christ, Tommy, what happened?" Tommy pushed past her into the kitchen, one eye swollen shut, his lips split and bleeding. His hands shook as he gripped the counter for support. "Polly's friends," he said thickly. "They wanted to send a message about patience." Sarah immediately went into nurse mode, examining his injuries with professional detachment. "We need to get you to the hospital. You might have a concussion." "No hospitals," Tommy said firmly. "I can't afford." He stopped, looking at Maggie. "Ma, Sit down," Maggie said quietly. "Both of you." They obeyed without question, Sarah helping Tommy into a chair. Maggie looked at her children, her beaten, desperate son and her guilt-ridden daughter, and felt the last of her illusions crumble. "Now," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart, Why don't you tell me exactly how deep this hole goes?" As Tommy began to speak, his words tumbling out between split lips and broken teeth, Maggie realized that the bet had been the least of their problems. Her children weren't just callous. They were drowning, and they'd been too proud or too scared to ask for help. The question now was whether she could save them before they all went under together. But as Maggie sat in the confessional at St. Bridget's 3 days later, she wondered if salvation was even possible for any of them. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," she whispered into the darkness beyond the screen. "It's been 2 weeks since my last confession." Father Donnelly's voice was gentle, familiar. He'd baptized all 3 of her children, married Sarah, buried Danny. "What troubles you, Maggie?" Where to begin? With the bet? With her own dark thoughts about revenge? With the way she'd been savoring her children's guilt like a fine wine? "I've been harboring anger, Father. Terrible anger toward my children." "Anger isn't always a sin, Maggie. Sometimes it's justified." She closed her eyes, pressing her palms together until her knuckles went white. "They've done something unforgivable. At least, it feels unforgivable. Tell me." The words came slowly at first, then, in a rush. "The baby monitor. The bet. Tommy's debts and the beating. Sarah's clinical calculations. Kevin's reluctant participation. Her own weeks of secret listening. Of watching them squirm. Of dropping hints designed to twist the knife." When she finished, the silence stretched so long she wondered if Father Donnelly had fallen asleep. Finally he spoke. "And what do you want to do about this knowledge?" "I want to hurt them," she admitted, the words scraping her throat raw. "I want them to suffer the way I'm suffering. I want to cut them out of everything, leave them with nothing but their guilt." That would be justice, some might say. But you're not asking me about justice, are you? You're asking about forgiveness." Maggie leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the cool wood of the screen. "How do I forgive something like this? How do I forgive my children for betting on my death?" "Tell me," Father Donnelly said quietly, "what do you think drove them to it? Greed? Callousness? The fact that they see me as an inconvenience? Is that really what you believe?" She wanted to say yes, wanted to hold on to her righteous anger. But the image of Tommy's beaten face kept intruding, and Sarah's tears, and Kevin's voice cracking with guilt on the baby monitor. "No," she whispered. "No, I think they're scared. Tommy's desperate about his debts. Sarah feels guilty about her comfortable life while we struggle. Kevin's trying to hold everyone together while fighting his own demons." She paused. "But that doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't. But understanding doesn't require approval, Maggie. It requires compassion." "I don't know if I have any compassion left." "You have enough to be here, asking these questions instead of acting on your anger. That's something." Maggie left the confessional feeling hollowed out but somehow lighter. The afternoon sun slanted through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns on the worn wooden pews where she'd sat every Sunday for 60 years. Danny used to hold her hand during the difficult sermons, squeeze her fingers when the priest talked about forgiveness being harder than revenge. "What would you do, Danny?" she asked the empty church. "How would you fix this mess?" But Danny wasn't there to answer, and she was tired of carrying this burden alone. At home, she found Kevin in the kitchen, making tea with the careful precision of someone trying to avoid more serious conversations. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands shook slightly as he poured the hot water. "How's Tommy?" she asked. "Sleeping." Sarah gave him some pain medication. Kevin glanced at her nervously. Ma, about what happened the other night. Sit down, Kevin. He obeyed, clutching his mug like a lifeline. Maggie studied her youngest son. Still baby-faced at 25, still carrying the weight of everyone else's problems on his shoulders. "Tell me about Marcus," she said suddenly. Kevin nearly choked on his tea. "What?" "Your partner, the one you've been with for 3 years but never quite found the courage to bring home for Sunday dinner." The color drained from Kevin's face. "How did you—" "I'm not blind, sweetheart, and I'm not as traditional as you think." She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I know you're gay. I know you love him. I know you've been afraid to tell us because you think we'll reject you." Kevin's eyes filled with tears. "Ma, is that why you agreed to the bet? Because you thought if I died, you wouldn't have to face disappointing me?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He doubled over, sobbing with the force of years of suppressed fear and guilt. "I never wanted to hurt you," he gasped. Tommy kept saying we needed to be realistic, and Sarah had all these medical facts, and I thought maybe if I could help them process it in a healthy way, by betting on when I die, by trying to make them see that you're stronger than they think." The words exploded out of him. "I took the longest odds, Ma, 12 months. I bet on you because I believe in you." Maggie felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but opening, like ice melting in spring. "Oh, my sweet boy, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry, and I know you'll never forgive me, and Marcus says I have to tell you everything, or he's leaving me, and I can't lose him too, Ma. I can't lose everyone." She stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her son into her arms. He collapsed against her, all 6 feet of him reduced to the scared little boy who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. "You're not losing me," she whispered into his hair. "You're not losing anyone." But the bet was a symptom, not the disease. She held him tighter. "We're all drowning, Kevin. All of us. And instead of helping each other, we've been pulling each other down." They held each other in the kitchen, where she'd heard the first terrible words through the baby monitor, where she'd watched Tommy bleed, where she'd confronted Sarah's guilt. But now, instead of betrayal, she felt the first tentative stirrings of hope. "I want to meet him," she said as Kevin's sobs subsided. "Marcus, I want to meet the man who makes my son happy." Kevin pulled back, staring at her through tear-swollen eyes. "Really? Really? And I want all of us, you, me, Tommy, Sarah, Marcus, to figure out how to save this family before it's too late." "What about the bet?" Maggie was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Father Donnelly's words, about forgiveness and compassion, and the difference between justice and revenge. "The bet ends now," she said finally. "No winners, no losers, just a family trying to find its way back to each other." Kevin nodded, wiping his eyes. "What do we do now?" Maggie looked around her kitchen, the heart of her home, the place where she'd fed her family, soothed their hurts, celebrated their joys. It could be that again, she realized. Not the same as before, but something new, something built on truth, instead of secrets. "Now," she said, "we stop lying to each other." Starting with Tommy. But as Maggie climbed the stairs to her son's room that evening, she wondered if they were already too late. Tommy's door was cracked open, and she could hear him on the phone, his voice tight with desperation. She paused in the hallway, her hand on the doorframe, listening to words that made her blood run cold. 48 hours? Tommy was saying. "Come on, Polly, you know I'm good for it. I just need a little more time." "Time's up, Tommy boy." The voice on speakerphone was flat, emotionless. "My patience ran out when my boys had to explain things to your face. Jesus, look, what if I could get you 10 grand by Friday? Show of good faith?" 10 grand? Out of 57,000 with interest? A harsh laugh. You're insulting me again. 57,000. The number hit Maggie like a physical blow. It had grown from 50 just days ago. I'll figure something out, Tommy said, his voice cracking. There's gotta be a way. There is a way. Your mother's got that nice little house. Probably worth what, 200? 250? Maggie pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp. I can't touch the house. It's not even mine. Could be, though. You said she's sick, right? Real sick? The silence stretched so long, Maggie thought the call had ended. Then Tommy spoke, his voice barely audible. Yeah, she's sick. Funny thing about sick people, sometimes they get sicker faster than expected. You know what I mean? I don't. What are you saying? I'm saying accidents happen, especially to cancer patients. Bodies are weak, immune systems shot. Real easy for something to go wrong. Maggie's legs gave out. She slumped against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. No. Tommy's voice was stronger now. No, I won't. That's my mother you're talking about. And she's gonna die anyway, right? According to you, she's got what, 6 months? 8? Why not make it sooner and solve everyone's problems? You're sick. I'm practical. 48 hours, Tommy. 10 grand minimum. Or we start getting creative about collection methods. The line went dead. Through the crack in the door, Maggie saw Tommy bury his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. For a moment she almost went to him, almost reached out to comfort her broken son. Then she heard his phone ring again. Sarah? Tommy's voice was different now, calculating, desperate. I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Maggie retreated to her bedroom, her mind racing. She sat on the bed she'd shared with Danny for 34 years, staring at his photograph on the nightstand. His kind eyes seemed to watch her, waiting for her to make sense of what she'd just heard. Her son, her firstborn, the baby she'd carried for 9 months and nursed for a year, had just been asked to murder her. And he'd said no for now. 20 minutes later, she heard Sarah's car in the driveway. Maggie crept to the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows as her daughter let herself in. What's so urgent? Sarah asked, her voice carrying up from the living room. We need to talk. About Ma. About the money. Tommy, if this is about the bet again. Forget the fucking bet. Tommy's voice was sharp with panic. This is about survival. Mine and yours and Kevin's. What are you talking about? Maggie heard the rustle of papers, then Sarah's sharp intake of breath. Jesus Christ, Tommy. Life insurance applications? When did you? Last month. Before the beating. I was thinking maybe there was a way to increase the payout, you know? But they want medical records. And with Ma's condition. His voice trailed off. This is fraud, Sarah said flatly. This is insurance fraud, and I won't be part of it. Then what do you suggest? Because Paulie's not exactly the patient type, and his solution to my debt problem involves Ma having an accident. Maggie gripped the banister so hard her knuckles cracked. He said, what? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. You heard me. These aren't nice people, Sarah. They don't wait for cancer to run its course. Oh my God. Oh my God. What have you done? I haven't done anything yet, but I'm running out of options. Ma's dying anyway. You said so yourself. The medical odds. Don't you dare. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare use my words to justify this? Then help me think of something else. Because in 48 hours, I'm either dead or Ma is. The silence that followed was deafening. Maggie closed her eyes, praying her daughter would be strong enough to walk away, to refuse to participate in whatever twisted plan Tommy was concocting. There might be something, Sarah said finally, her voice so quiet Maggie had to strain to hear. Her medication, the painkillers. if someone were to adjust the dosage. Sarah. It would look natural. With her condition, her weakened state, an accidental overdose wouldn't be questioned, especially if it happened gradually, over a few days. Maggie felt the world tilt sideways. Her daughter, her careful professional daughter, was talking about murdering her with the same clinical detachment she used to discuss treatment protocols. "You could do that?" Tommy asked. "I could. I have access to her medical records, her prescription history. It wouldn't be hard to make it look accidental." "And the timeline?" "A week. Maybe less if we increase the dose gradually." Maggie heard footsteps downstairs, then Kevin's voice. "What's going on?" "Sarah texted me to come over, said it was an emergency." A pause. Then Tommy. "Kev, sit down. We need to talk about Ma." Maggie couldn't listen anymore. She stumbled back to her bedroom, her hands shaking so violently she could barely close the door. Her children, all three of them, were downstairs planning her murder. Not in the abstract way of their original bet, but concretely, practically, with timelines and methods and medical expertise. She sat on Danny's side of the bed, his pillow still holding the faint scent of his aftershave after all these months. The children he'd loved so fiercely, defended so passionately, were now discussing the best way to kill their mother. Maggie picked up the phone and dialed Rose's number with trembling fingers. "Rose? It's me. I need you to come over. Right now." "What's wrong? You sound terrible." Maggie looked toward the door, knowing her children were still downstairs, still planning, still calculating the best way to end her life. "I think," she said quietly, "I'm about to find out who my real family is." But as Rose Murphy burst through her front door 20 minutes later, Maggie realized she already knew the answer. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Rose said, taking one look at Maggie's face. "What's happened now?" Maggie handed her the baby monitor receiver, its green light blinking innocently. From downstairs came the murmur of her children's voices, still planning, still calculating. "Listen," Maggie whispered. Rose's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, horror, and finally, cold fury that made her look like an avenging angel in a housecoat. "Those ungrateful bastards," she hissed. "I'm calling the police." "No," Maggie's voice was steady, surprising them both. "Not yet." "Maggie, they're talking about killing you." "They're talking about saving Tommy. In their minds, anyway." She took the monitor back, holding it like evidence in a trial. "But you're right. This ends now." "What are you going to do?" Maggie looked toward the stairs, then at the baby monitor in her hands. "I'm gonna give them exactly what they think they want." "A family meeting?" Rose started to protest, but Maggie held up her hand. "Stay here. If things go badly, then you call the police. But I need to face this myself first." She walked downstairs slowly, each step deliberate. Her children were clustered around the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where she'd helped with homework, where Danny had taught them to play poker on rainy Sunday afternoons. They looked up when she entered, their faces shifting through identical expressions of guilt and panic. Kevin went white. Sarah's hand flew to her throat. Tommy half rose from his chair, then sank back down. "Don't stop on my account," Maggie said pleasantly, setting the baby monitor on the table between them. "I was enjoying your conversation." The silence was absolute. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. "Ma," Kevin started, his voice cracking. 3 weeks," Maggie said, cutting him off. 3 weeks I've been listening to you through this thing. 3 weeks of hearing my children discuss my death like it's a business transaction." Tommy found his voice first. "You don't understand." "Don't I?" Maggie's voice remained calm, but her eyes were ice. Let me tell you what I understand. I understand that my eldest son owes $57,000 to loan sharks who want to kill me. I understand that my daughter, my nurse daughter, just volunteered to murder me with an overdose of my own medication. I understand that my youngest son, who I thought was the moral center of this family, has been helping plan the whole thing. It's not like that, Sarah burst out. We weren't really going to. Weren't you? Maggie turned to face her daughter. Tell me, Sarah, when you were explaining how to adjust my medication dosage, were you speaking hypothetically? Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. And you, Tommy? Maggie swung her gaze to her eldest son. When Polly suggested making my death look accidental, you said no. But then you came downstairs and asked your siblings to help you do it anyway. So what changed? Your conscience? Or just your method? Tommy's face crumpled. Ma, I never wanted this. But they're going to kill me. And if they kill me, what happens to my kids? To you? To all of us. So you decided to kill me first. No! God! No, it wasn't supposed to be. He broke down completely, sobbing into his hands. I'm so fucking sorry. I'm so sorry, Ma. I don't know how it got this far. I do, Maggie said quietly. It got this far because we stopped talking to each other. Because we started keeping secrets. Because instead of facing our problems together, we each decided to handle them alone. She looked around the table at her 3 children. And because you all forgot that I'm not just your mother, I'm also a person. A person who loves you more than her own life. Kevin was crying now too, silent tears streaming down his face. Sarah sat frozen, her nurse's training warring with her daughter's guilt. The bet was cruel, Maggie continued, but I could have forgiven the bet. What I can't forgive is that when push came to shove, when you had to choose between my life and Tommy's debt, you chose the debt. That's not true, Kevin whispered. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you all agreed that murdering your mother was an acceptable solution to Tommy's gambling problem. We would never actually, Sarah started. Never actually, what? Follow through? How was I supposed to know that? How was I supposed to sleep in this house, eat food you prepared, take medication you had access to, knowing that you'd already planned out how to kill me? The words hit them like physical blows. Tommy's sobs grew louder. Kevin buried his face in his hands. Sarah sat rigid with shock. Here's what's gonna happen, Maggie said, her voice cutting through their anguish. First, the bet ends. No winner, no loser, no payout. Consider it void. Ma, Tommy started. Second, you're going to call Polly and tell him you need more time. All the time in the world. Because the plan you were discussing isn't happening. He'll kill me, Tommy said flatly. Maybe, but I won't let my son become a murderer to save his life. There are other ways to handle bullies like Polly. What other ways? Maggie pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Father Donnelly? It's Maggie O'Brien. I need you to come over right away and bring that list of resources you're always talking about. The debt counselors, the Legal Aid Society, all of it. She paused. And father? You might want to call that nephew of yours. The one who's a detective. Tommy's eyes went wide. Ma, you can't involve the police. If Polly finds out, Polly's going to find out that the O'Brien family doesn't negotiate with terrorists. Even when the terrorist is threatening one of our own. This is insane, Sarah said. You're going to get Tommy killed. No, Maggie said firmly. You were going to get me killed. I'm going to get Tommy help. She looked around the table one more time. All of you help. Why? Kevin asked quietly. After everything we've done, Why would you help us?" Maggie felt her composure crack slightly, but she held on. "Because you're my children. Because I love you. Because even when you were planning to murder me, I could hear the fear in your voices. You're not killers. You're just scared kids who made terrible choices." She stood up, the baby monitor in her hands. "But love has limits. And if any of you ever threaten my life again, I won't hesitate to protect myself. Do you understand?" They nodded, all three of them looking younger than they had in years. "Good," Maggie said. "Now let's figure out how to fix this mess. Together this time." But within an hour of her confrontation, the family had scattered like startled birds, leaving Maggie alone with the wreckage of 30 years of motherhood. Tommy had bolted first, mumbling something about needing air before disappearing into the February cold. Sarah had fled to her car in tears, claiming she needed to check on her children. Kevin had simply walked upstairs and locked his bedroom door, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. Only Rose remained, sitting at the kitchen table with her arms crossed and her jaw set in that stubborn line Maggie had known since they were children. "Well," Rose said, pouring herself another cup of coffee, "that went about as well as a root canal." Maggie slumped into her chair, feeling every one of her 58 years, plus about 20 more. "I had to do it." "I know you did. Doesn't mean it didn't hurt like hell to watch." Through the kitchen window, Maggie could see Tommy pacing in the backyard, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from here, she could read the panic in his posture. "Think he's calling Polly?" Rose asked, following her gaze. "Probably. Or maybe he's calling someone worse." They sat in silence, watching Tommy's agitated movements. The afternoon light was already fading. February days were stingy with sunshine, as if the city itself was depressed. "You know where he's going to go," Rose said finally. Maggie nodded. She'd been thinking the same thing. When Tommy was 8 years old and had broken their neighbor's window with a baseball, he'd hidden at Danny's grave for 3 hours before they found him. When his marriage fell apart, same place. When he lost his job, same place. Danny's grave was Tommy's sanctuary, the one place he felt safe enough to fall apart. "Should we?" "No." Maggie's voice was firm. "He needs time to process. And I need time to figure out what comes next." But even as she said it, worry gnawed at her. Tommy, in his current state, facing Polly's deadline with no solutions, was capable of desperate things. The beating had rattled him badly, and desperate people made dangerous choices. Her phone rang, startling them both. Father Donnelly's name appeared on the screen. "Maggie, I'm on my way over. And I've got good news and bad news about resources." "Give me the bad news first." The Legal Aid Society is backlogged 6 weeks for non-emergency cases. The Debt Counseling Service has a waiting list. And the good news, my nephew Detective Riley is off duty, and he's agreed to have an unofficial conversation about your situation. No arrest warrants, no formal reports, just advice on how to handle threatening loan sharks. Maggie felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. How soon can he be here? 20 minutes. But Maggie, he's going to need details. Names, amounts, evidence of threats. I have evidence. Good. And Maggie? You did the right thing calling me. After hanging up, Maggie turned to Rose. I need you to do something for me. Name it. Find Kevin. Talk to him. He's probably the most salvageable of the three right now, but he's also the most fragile. I need to know he's not going to do something stupid. Rose nodded and headed upstairs. Maggie heard her knocking on Kevin's door, her voice low and persuasive. The murmur of conversation followed, then Kevin's door opening. Alone in her kitchen, Maggie allowed herself one moment of complete breakdown. She pressed her face into her hands and sobbed. For Danny, for her dying body, for the children who had loved her enough to consider murder, the irony wasn't lost on her. In their twisted way, they'd been trying to save each other. Tommy from his creditors, the family from watching her suffer, themselves from the pain of loss. But love that justified murder wasn't love at all. It was something else, something that needed to be cut out like cancer. The front door slammed, and she quickly wiped her eyes. Kevin appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face blotchy but determined. "Ma, I need to tell you something." "Sit down, sweetheart." He perched on the edge of his chair like he might flee at any moment. "Marcus wants to leave me." "Because of the bet?" "Because of everything. The lying, the family dysfunction, the fact that I was willing to participate in." He couldn't finish the sentence. "He says I'm not the person he thought I was." "Are you?" Kevin looked up, startled by the directness of the question. "I don't know," he admitted. "I thought I was the good one, you know, the one who went to college, who helps people for a living, who tries to do the right thing." Kevin full tone. When Tommy started talking about the bet, when Sarah started calculating odds, he shook his head. "I told myself I was protecting you by betting on you to live longer, but really I was just protecting myself from admitting how terrified I am of losing you. And now? Now I don't know how to fix any of it. Tommy's probably going to get himself killed. Sarah's having a breakdown. Marcus won't even answer my calls. And you." He looked at her with eyes full of pain. "You should hate us. We don't deserve forgiveness." "You're right," Maggie said quietly. "You don't deserve it. Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you receive. And right now, I'm choosing to give it to you. Why? Because the alternative is watching this family destroy itself completely. Because I'd rather die knowing I tried to save you than die knowing I gave up on you." Kevin broke down again, but this time, his tears felt cleaner somehow, like rain washing away dust. The doorbell rang, and Maggie heard Father Donnelly's voice in the hallway, along with another man's deeper tones. "Detective Riley, presumably." "Kevin," she said gently, "I need you to call Marcus. Tell him everything that happened today. Tell him you're getting help, that the family is getting help. Tell him." She paused, thinking. "Tell him that your mother would like to meet him properly, under better circumstances." "You would?" "I would. But first, we need to find your brother before he does something we can't undo." As if summoned by her words, the back door slammed open. Tommy stood there, wild-eyed and shaking, clutching his phone like a weapon. "I called him," he said, his voice hollow. "I called Polly and told him I needed more time. And?" He laughed. "Said time was up as of midnight tonight. Said if I didn't have his money by then, he'd collect it from the family." Tommy's eyes focused on her with terrible clarity. "Ma, he knows where Sarah lives. He knows about her kids." The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of Father Donnelly and Detective Riley approaching from the front hall. Maggie felt the last of her illusions crumble. This wasn't just about Tommy anymore. Polly had made it about all of them. "Then we'd better hope," she said grimly, "that Detective Riley has some very good advice." But 3 months later, as Maggie sat in Dr. Jennifer Walsh's office watching her family navigate their first real conversation in years, she realized that sometimes the best advice was simply to start telling the truth. "Tommy," Dr. Walsh said, her voice patient but firm, "you've been in the program for 12 weeks now. How are you feeling about sharing your story with your family?" Tommy shifted in his chair, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He'd lost weight since that terrible night when Detective Riley had outlined their options: formal charges against Polly's operation, witness protection, or working with the district attorney to build a case while the family received police protection. They'd chosen the last option, And for 6 weeks, unmarked cars had sat outside their houses while investigators built their case. It's hard, Tommy admitted. Talking about it makes it real, you know? Like, I can't pretend anymore that I'm just unlucky, or that it was just a few bad bets. He looked around the circle at his mother, Sarah, and Kevin. I'm an addict. I'm a gambling addict, and I almost got my family killed because of it. Maggie felt her chest tighten. The words still hurt to hear, but there was something different in Tommy's voice now. Ownership instead of excuse-making, shame instead of defiance. And how does it feel to say that out loud? Dr. Walsh prompted. Fucking terrifying, Tommy said, then immediately looked at his mother. Sorry, Ma. Language is the least of my concerns right now, Maggie said dryly, and was rewarded with a ghost of his old smile. Dr. Walsh turned to Sarah. Sarah, you've been quiet today. How are you processing Tommy's recovery journey? Sarah had been staring at her hands throughout most of the session. She looked up now, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. I keep thinking about what I said, she whispered. About the medication. About how easy it would be to... She couldn't finish. I'm a nurse. I took an oath, and I was ready to kill my own mother. You were scared, Kevin said gently. We all were. That's not an excuse. Sarah's voice cracked. Being scared doesn't justify murder. No, it doesn't, Dr. Walsh agreed. But understanding the fear helps us understand the choice. Sarah, what were you afraid of? Sarah was quiet for so long Maggie thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I was afraid of watching her die slowly. I was afraid of her being in pain. I was afraid that my medical knowledge would make it worse, that I'd know exactly how much she was suffering. She looked up at Maggie, tears streaming down her face. And I was afraid that Tom was right, that you were going to die anyway, and we'd lose the house and everything, and I'd have to watch my children grow up in poverty like I did. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Maggie reached across the circle and took her daughter's hand. Oh, sweetheart, she said softly, you never lived in poverty. Didn't I? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Ma, I remember counting out food stamps at the grocery store. I remember you and Dad fighting about money at night when you thought we were asleep. I remember wearing the same winter coat for 3 years because we couldn't afford a new one. The words hit Maggie like physical blows. She'd thought they'd hidden their struggles so well. I never wanted you kids to know. But we did know. And I swore, when I got married, that my children would never have to worry about money the way I did. But if something happened to you, if we lost the house, if Tom's debts somehow became our responsibility... Sarah shook her head. I convinced myself that helping him solve his problem quickly was protecting everyone. Dr. Walsh nodded. Fear can make us rationalize terrible things. Kevin, what were you afraid of? Kevin had been sitting with his arms wrapped around himself, rocking slightly in his chair. I was afraid of being alone, he said simply. Dad was gone. Ma was dying. Tommy was self-destructing. Sarah was pulling away to protect her family. I thought if I could just manage the situation, keep everyone together somehow, maybe we wouldn't all fall apart. And now? Dr. Walsh asked. Now I'm learning that you can't manage other people's lives. You can only manage your own response to them. He looked at Maggie. Ma, I called Marcus yesterday. Maggie felt her heart lift slightly. And? He's willing to try again. He wants to meet you properly when things are more stable, he said. Kevin's voice cracked. He said he understands why I made the choices I did, but he needs to see that I'm capable of making better ones. That's fair, Maggie said. Dr. Walsh turned to her. Maggie, how are you processing all of this? Your children have shared some very painful truths today. Maggie was quiet for a moment, thinking about the baby monitor that still sat in her kitchen drawer, about the nights she'd lain awake planning revenge, about the moment she'd chosen forgiveness over destruction. I'm proud of them, she said finally, not for what they did, but for their willingness to face it. To sit here and tell the truth about their fears, their mistakes, their shame. She looked around the circle. 6 months ago, we were a family of secrets, everyone protecting everyone else from the truth, until the secrets became more dangerous than the truth itself. And now? Now we're a family in recovery, all of us. She paused. I had a medical scare last week. Chest pains that turned out to be anxiety, not cancer progression. But for 12 hours in the ER, I thought I was dying. And you know what I realized? They waited. I realized that I wasn't afraid of dying anymore. I was afraid of dying without having really lived. Without having honest relationships with my children. Without knowing who they really were, not just who I wanted them to be. Tommy spoke up. Ma, about the house. The insurance money. If something does happen to you. There is no insurance money, Maggie said calmly. The room went silent. What? Sarah whispered. I canceled the policy 3 weeks ago. Used the premium money to help fund Tommy's debt repayment plan. She looked around at their shocked faces. Detective Riley was right. Paying off Polly was the safest option for everyone. So I liquidated what I could. The church organized a fundraiser, and the community rallied. It's handled. But the house, our inheritance, Sarah started, will be whatever's left when I die, which won't be much. But it'll be honest. Maggie leaned forward. I need to know that you love me for me, not for what I might leave behind. The silence stretched until Tommy started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but something lighter, almost relieved. Jesus, Ma, you really don't do anything halfway, do you? Not when it comes to family, she said firmly. We're starting over, all of us. With truth, this time. But as autumn painted the Boston streets in shades of gold and crimson, Maggie discovered that truth was a luxury she might not have time to fully embrace. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, jarring her from the restless sleep that had become her norm since the latest round of chemotherapy. Sarah's voice was tight, with professional concern masked as daughterly worry. Ma, I'm at the hospital. I need you to come in. Now. What's wrong? But even as she asked, Maggie already knew. The persistent cough, the bone-deep fatigue, the way her appetite had disappeared over the past 2 weeks. Her body was telling a story she'd been trying not to read. Just come in. I'll meet you at the ER entrance. The drive through empty streets felt surreal, like navigating a dream where every familiar landmark carried new weight. Past street bridges, where she'd prayed for strength. Past the cemetery where Danny waited. Past the elementary school, where she'd served lunch to other people's children for 15 years. Each mile marker in a life that might be reaching its final chapter. Sarah was waiting with a wheelchair, her nurse's mask firmly in place but her eyes giving away everything. Pneumonia, she said without preamble as they moved through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Your immune system is compromised from the chemo, and your body couldn't fight it off. Dr. Reyes was waiting in the examination room, her face grave but kind. Maggie, we need to talk about treatment options. The next hours passed in a blur of medical terminology and hushed conferences. Aggressive intervention versus comfort care. Quality of life versus quantity of time. The same impossible choices that families faced in hospital rooms across the city every day. But now it was her choices, her time. Her family gathered in the waiting room with faces full of fear. Tommy arrived first, still smelling faintly of the construction site where he'd found work through a program for recovering addicts. His hands were clean now. No gambling debt, no loan sharks, no desperate schemes, but his eyes carried new lines of worry. "How bad?" he asked Sarah, who was staring at Maggie's chart like it might change if she looked hard enough. "Bad. The pneumonia is responding to treatment, but her numbers..." Sarah's voice trailed off. "The cancer is accelerating. The stress on her system, the constant treatment, it's like her body is just tired of fighting." Kevin appeared in the doorway with Marcus beside him. The first time Marcus had come to a family crisis, and somehow the worst possible circumstances for a formal introduction. "Mrs. O'Brien," Marcus said quietly, extending his hand. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this." "Don't be sorry," Maggie managed from her hospital bed, her voice hoarse but determined. "I'm glad you're here. Kevin needs you." They gathered around her bed like they had around the kitchen table during better times. Tommy perched on the edge of a chair, Sarah reviewing medical charts with obsessive precision, Kevin holding Marcus's hand while fighting back tears. "Dr. Reyes says I have choices," Maggie said, cutting through their careful small talk. "We can fight this aggressively, which might buy me a few more months but will definitely make those months miserable. Or we can focus on comfort, make sure I'm not in pain, and let things take their natural course." "We fight," Tommy said immediately. "We fight with everything we've got." "Tommy," Sarah started. "No," his voice cracked. "I'm not losing her. Not now. Not when we're finally..." He couldn't finish, but they all understood. Not when they were finally becoming a real family again. "The decision is mine," Maggie said gently but firmly. "But I want to hear what you all think." "Really think, not what you think I want to hear." Sarah spoke first, her medical training warring with her daughter's heart. "Aggressive treatment would mean more chemotherapy, radiation, possible surgery. Your quality of life would be minimal. You'd be in the hospital more than home. And even then, we're talking about months, not years. And comfort care, pain management, palliative support. You could go home, spend time with family, have some good days." Sarah's voice broke slightly. "Maybe not as many days, but better ones." Kevin was crying silently, Marcus's arm around his shoulders. "I just want you to not hurt," he whispered. "I want you to be able to laugh again, to enjoy things. I want..." He stopped, wiping his eyes. "I want you to meet my nieces and nephews properly. I want Marcus to understand why I love this family so much, even after everything." Maggie looked around at her children, her complicated, flawed, beloved children who had bet on her death and then fought like hell to save her life, who had planned her murder and then nursed her back from the brink, who had lied to her and then learned to tell the truth. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I need to tell you." They leaned closer, as if proximity could somehow hold her to earth through sheer will. "I've been writing letters. To each of you, to your children, to Marcus." She smiled weakly. "Call it my insurance policy. The real kind, not the financial kind. Things I want you to know. Things I need to say while I still can." "Ma," Tommy started. "Let me finish. I've also been working with Father Donnelly on something else. A foundation, using what's left of the house money. For families dealing with gambling addiction and medical debt." She looked at Tommy. "Your story. Our story. It could help other people avoid the same mistakes." The room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the distant sounds of hospital life continuing around them. "I want to go home," Maggie said finally. "I want whatever time I have left to be real time, not hospital time. I want Sunday dinners and arguments about politics and Kevin bringing Marcus around so I can embarrass him with baby pictures. The doctors say you'll need round-the-clock care, Sarah said, her nurse's practicality asserting itself. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Maggie reached for their hands. We've gotten good at handling impossible situations. Tommy squeezed her fingers. I'll move back in. Full-time. I can work construction during the day and take care of you at night. I can handle the medical aspects, Sarah said. Coordinate with hospice, manage medications, make sure you're comfortable. And I'll handle everything else, Kevin added. Meals, visitors, making sure this place doesn't fall apart. Marcus spoke up quietly. If you need help with logistics, coordination, I have some flexibility at work. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Maggie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, not tears of sadness, but something more complex. Gratitude mixed with grief, love mixed with loss. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. For choosing to fight for me instead of betting against me. Ma, Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion, we're done betting against each other. From now on, we're all in this together. Outside the hospital window, autumn was giving way to winter, but in room 314, something that had been frozen for months was finally beginning to thaw. Now on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year since that terrible February morning when she'd first heard the bet, Maggie O'Brien sat at her kitchen table surrounded by the impossible, her whole family, together, telling the truth. Snow fell beyond the windows, blanketing Dorchester Street in pristine white that would be gray slush by morning. But tonight, it looked like hope. Like clean slates and new beginnings, even at the end of all things. More wine, Grandma? Emma asked, Sarah's 11-year-old daughter wielding the bottle of sparkling cider with the seriousness of a sommelier. Just a splash, sweetheart, Maggie said, though she wouldn't drink much. The medications made everything taste like metal, but the ritual mattered. The togetherness mattered. Around her table, their table really, since they'd all moved back in during the past 2 months, the O'Brien family had learned to take up space differently. Tommy sat where Danny used to, but instead of trying to fill his father's shoes, he'd found his own place as the family's protector and practical problem solver. His hands were steady now, his eyes clear. 6 months of sobriety had given him back his dignity, even as his mother's illness gave him a different kind of purpose. Sarah occupied her old chair, but her medical bag sat by the door, not hidden away like a shameful secret, but present and acknowledged. She'd become their bridge between hope and reality, translating doctor speak into plain English, managing medications with the precision of a pharmacist and the tenderness of a daughter. Her children came by after school now, filling the house with noise and normalcy. Kevin had claimed the spot nearest the kitchen, making himself indispensable in the way he'd always tried to be, but honestly this time. He coordinated visitors, managed the foundation paperwork, and made sure Marcus felt welcome at a table where love was complicated but genuine. Marcus sat beside him now, no longer an outsider, but not quite an insider either. Somewhere in that generous space families make for people who love their members well. I can't believe it's been a year, Sarah said, refilling her own glass. Last Christmas Eve I thought. We all thought, Kevin finished gently. But here we are. Here we are, Maggie echoed, though she knew, they all knew, that her presence at next year's table was unlikely. The pneumonia had been defeated, but the cancer remained, patient and persistent. Dr. Reyes had given her months, not years, and even those months were a gift borrowed against time. But tonight, time felt generous. I have something for each of you, Maggie said, reaching for the manila envelope she'd placed beside her plate. Not presents exactly, but... Ma, you didn't need to, Tommy started. Hush! She pulled out 3 sealed envelopes, each marked with a child's name in her careful handwriting. These are the letters I told you about. The real ones, not the drafts I've been working on for months. They accepted the envelopes with the reverence of people handling artifacts, which in a way, they were. Don't read them now, Maggie said quickly. Later, when you need them. When you're having a bad day, or when you can't remember why you love each other, or when you're trying to figure out how to be a family without me. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, pregnant with understanding and acceptance. There's something else, Kevin said, exchanging glances with his siblings. We have something for you too. Tommy disappeared into the living room and returned with a small wrapped box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a baby monitor. Not the old one that had caused so much pain, but a new one, sleek and modern. We thought, Sarah said carefully, that maybe we could try again. But differently this time. The receiver stays down here, Kevin explained. In your room when you need it. But the transmitter goes upstairs in the family room. So instead of us talking about you, we can talk with you, Tommy finished. When you're too tired to climb the stairs but want to be part of whatever chaos is happening up there. Maggie held the device in her hands, feeling its weight. So much lighter than the old one, but somehow more substantial. You want to give me the power to eavesdrop on purpose? We want to give you the power to be part of this family in whatever way you can, for as long as you can, Sarah said. No more secrets, no more betting, just conversation. The doorbell rang, and Rose Murphy let herself in with the confidence of 60 years of friendship. Behind her came Father Donnelly, stamping snow off his boots and carrying a bottle of wine that was definitely not appropriate for recovering alcoholics, but perfect for Irish Christmas Eves. Sorry I'm late, Rose announced. Had to finish wrapping presents for half the neighborhood. She surveyed the table with satisfaction. Well, would you look at this? A proper family dinner. Father Donnelly took his place at the table, Danny's old chair, which somehow seemed fitting. Shall we say grace? They joined hands around the table, this unlikely collection of people who had learned that love was messier and more dangerous and more necessary than any of them had imagined. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, Father Donnelly began, his voice carrying the weight of ritual and the lightness of genuine gratitude. Which we are about to receive, the family joined in, voices overlapping and harmonizing in the way that only comes from years of shared meals and shared struggles. From thy bounty, through Christ our Lord, Amen. But Maggie wasn't finished. And bless this year we've had together, she continued, her voice soft but clear. The terrible parts and the beautiful parts, the mistakes and the forgiveness, the fear and the love. Bless the time we have left, however much or little it may be. And bless the foundation we're building for Tommy's kids and Sarah's kids, and all the families who will come after us, who will learn that love means telling the truth, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts, Tommy added quietly. Amen, they said together, and meant it. Later, after the dishes were done and the wine was finished and the children had been tucked into beds throughout the house, Maggie sat in her kitchen one last time as the matriarch of a family that had learned to bet on each other instead of against each other. The baby monitor sat silent on the counter, waiting. Upstairs, she could hear voices, her children and Marcus planning something, probably a surprise for New Year's or her birthday. She could turn on the monitor and listen, but she didn't need to anymore. Whatever they were planning, she trusted it would be done with love. Outside, snow continued to fall on Dorchester Street, covering a year's worth of footprints and tire tracks, and the scattered debris of ordinary life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new appointments with Dr. Reyes, new adjustments to medications and expectations. But tonight, Maggie O'Brien was exactly where she belonged, at the center of a family that had wagered everything on love and won. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote.